Okay, so your question is that we've talked about how we as adults have wound up with all of the sankara from the past, but you're asking how does that process happen with kids? Is that right?
Well, I was thinking more of in terms of if you're an adult for whom, like thinking of the psychotherapy model, like things happen to you when you're a child that then get embedded in a kind of certain level of your thinking and behavior that then become habitual over time, and eventually you can't really sort of see them as choices.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's and that I'm not sure whether they figured that out all on their own or whether they just picked that up out of some Buddhist book someplace. And according to Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, we got to give them credit for being able to find things on their own.
Hmm.
We don't always have to get stuff out of the book. We can actually look and see what's happening.
Okay.
But one of the things about the psychology is that they get interested in what is called psychological archaeology,
Mm.
which means they deal with the past, hoping that the past has a clue
Mm.
for the present. And the
Hmm.
answer is yes, it does, and it'll clue you right into suffering in a skinny minute.
Hmm.
That it's better to deal with the issues that we have now, perhaps with kind of an understanding of where they came from, but we
Mm.
don't have to chase it down.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it may just kind of come up.
Mm.
The question is, how are we going to deal with it?
Hmm.
Now, um, there's a joke about that, by the way, and the joke is that the guy, uh, uh, gruff, mean dude, winds up in psychotherapy. Maybe he was put into it,
Hmm.
and so he and the psychiatrist go into that stuff, and he winds up thinking about a time when he was 4 years old when his mom gave him a spanking. And so he and the psychiatrist congratulate each other. Now we know the source of all of this rage, that we know why you're an asshole.
Hmm.
But basically, they didn't go any further than that because if they'd looked at why did his mom give him a spanking, it was because he was already an asshole. So little kids are, in fact, that way. They throw tantrums,
Hmm.
they throw things, they yell, they
Hmm.
cry, they want their way, they act like little animals.
Hmm.
They are little animals.
Yeah.
And our society then is designed around trying to take every new child that's born and make it into a citizen fit for work.
Hmm.
Right? And every child resists that right along the way.
Hmm.
And so that's the way that we become. So we wind up feeling guilty. We find up wanting revenge on
Hmm.
society. We feel like we've been lied to,
Hmm.
and that we didn't get what we were promised.
Hmm.
And I'm proud of the education that I have, but I still don't know what I need to know to be wealthy. And
Hmm.
therefore, I'm still defeated and disappointed. Okay, so here is all of that stuff that we are raised with
Hmm.
that I will put into the bucket that I call critical thinking.
Hmm.
That we are critical of ourselves, we are critical of other people,
Hmm.
we are critical of the society. We didn't get what we want from it. We're disappointed.
Hmm.
And so we've got just layer after layer after layer of dukkha in there.
Hmm.
Every layer is a very thin layer. It's like a coat of varnish. And a
Hmm.
nice coat of varnish is really nice, but 13 to 15 coats of varnish, where's
Hmm.
the wood in there someplace?
Hmm.
And so basically, that's what happens is that we've got layer after layer of things
Mm.
to deal with, but they'll each one come up in its own time.
Mm.
And that's when we deal with it, only is when it comes up.
Mm. Mm.
And the way that we're going to deal with it when it comes up is to recognize it for what it is, grab it by the throat, and throw it out of the mind.
Mm.
There. That's all we have to do. I'm finished now. I can go back to being blissfully happy.
Mm.
And we keep doing that over and over and over again until we get quite expert
Mm.
at throwing the stuff out,
Mm.
examining it with wisdom.
Mm.
So there is a process that we go through in doing that.
Mm.
And that the Buddha actually talks about it in this sense, that there is steps. Um, Actually, he doesn't call them steps. He calls it knowledge. There
Mm.
is the first knowledge. There is the second knowledge.
Mm.
There is the third knowledge, up through seven knowledge.
Mm.
Goes up through seven. And that the seven knowledges together, combined and working together with each other, is the fruit of Sotapan, the fruit of the path.
Mm.
But that any one of the steps is a noble step.
Mm.
And therefore, one is on the noble path with having any one of these
Mm.
knowledges. That's an interesting point, okay? And so we're talking about a big long range here of at least seven strides.
Mm.
So that first knowledge
Mm.
is actually what I talk about to the students a lot about, either indirectly or directly,
Mm.
in the sense that this is the part of the Eightfold and Noble Path that does start to bear fruit in the sense of the right attitude.
Mm. Mm.
And so the first knowledge then is the right attitude that no matter how screwed up my mind gets, I can unscrew it.
Mm. Mm.
That no matter how hindered the mind is, I can unhinder it. I can unhinge it.
Mhm.
Okay, that's the first knowledge. That means that
Mm.
we have made quite a lot of progress
Mm.
along the
Mm.
path
Mm. Mm.
to keep coming back and coming back and coming back until we know that we can come back.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
And then we have from time to time an opportunity to test it,
Mm.
to test the strength. And that testing the strength also um, improves the strength. Many
Mhm.
ways are like that. An example of it is that having students take, um, let's say, pre-test will help them then take the final test. In America, they have the SAT, then they
Mm.
have the PSAT, and the PSAT is what the kids take in high school
Mm.
to get ready before they take the real test. Okay,
Mhm.
and so we can think of then illness is nothing but the pretest to old age. And
Right.
that old age is nothing but the pretest of being old and sick.
Mhm.
And then being old and sick is the pretext for croaking. Are you ready to croak?
Yeah.
Okay. The
Mm.
answer is that you can be if you've got your muscles flexed up.
Mm.
All right. If you're
Mhm.
strong enough to handle the big stuff, and that would be a good thing to know because if you know that you can handle the big stuff, then you
Mm.
don't have to worry about not being able to handle the big stuff.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, when it times come, man, I'm ready to go then. But only when it's the right time. I'm not going to try to set anything up or anything, but when it's the right time, yeah, out we go. Bye bye.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So long. I will not see you later. I am not coming back. I am out of here.
Mm.
So this um, first knowledge
Mhm.
then is the knowledge that we can overcome that past.
Mm, mm, mm,
That most people never think that they can overcome their past.
mm,
That in fact everything about religion talks about that. There's an original sin.
mm,
Okay, you got
mm,
original sin. You were born dirty.
mm, mm,
Okay, no, we were born instinctually,
mm,
and we can clean that out. We
mm,
can, in fact. But most of what happened in society was is that basically society is a mixture of uh, ordinary human instinct
mm,
with higher ideals.
mm, mm,
Okay, and so it's kind of mixed together. But when we teach children, we teach their high ideals in a way that they will understand. This is why
mm,
we have the whole idea with children of punishment.
mm,
To spare the rod, to spoil the child, or to make the child understand that he's responsible for a few things like that. But basically, what kids pick up is that big people are mean.
mm. Yeah.
Hmm.
Mm,
Very rarely. Here's a good example: is the kids who went to Catholic school,
mm,
and they talk about the nuns,
mm,
but they talk about how mean and vicious the nuns were,
mm,
and they don't talk about how loving and kind they were,
mm,
or that the kid actually needed that punishment, and he's
mm,
glad that no, we don't remember things like that. We almost remember it with a grudge kind of a feeling.
mm, mm. Yeah.
And they want some sort of revenge for it. This is
Mm,
because of the way that society is taught
mm,
to our children. But then it's those people who grow up with that kind of feeling, those are the same ones that are now going to teach the next generation of kids how to behave
mm,
with resentment
mm,
and fear of retribution, fear of
mm,
hell, and whatnot
mm,
like that. But at least that gives us a society.
mm,
Um, they've known about this in psychology for a long, long time, and that is that if you have a child at a certain young age
mm,
that is around a very, very large family of adults with
mm,
aunts and uncles and grandmas and grandpas and all of that, so it's about a ratio of 10 to 20 to 1.
mm,
That child is much better off than if he's in a daycare center where you've got one adult with 20 kids.
mm,
Okay, why? Is because they are going to learn with very little scrutiny how to behave like an adult,
mm,
and instead they behave like all of the other kids around them.
mm,
Okay, and so keeping kids out of daycare and keeping them around adults,
mm,
especially if these adults are happy.
mm.
Okay, to keep the kids
Yeah.
around happy adults. This was the kind of lifestyle, in fact, that the Dalai Lama was raised in.
Mm,
But most of us never get that kind of an
mm.
opportunity, and so we get a real mixed bag of.
Yeah. Not around many happy adults. Most of
Right.
us. Um, yeah.
But we're capable of it.
Mm,
In a way, look at all of that fuel that we've been stored away. We never
mm,
have set on fire. It's like a
mm,
huge fire that we haven't allowed control burns well.
mm. There's there's this one sutta I was reading which I don't think I really understand, but it was where the Buddha talks about before you can shape yourself into before you can shape gold into something that's like really valuable and worthwhile, you have to purify it. Um, and I was thinking about, I thought that would maybe could easily refer to stages of awakening, but it could also refer to just sitting on the cushion um, and kind of cleaning out the mind. And
Or it
but
can be both.
it can be both, yeah. And then I thought it could be both, and it's fine. But in terms of that
Well, in
process,
fact, if you keep practicing, and in fact, look at the way that gold is, in fact, purified,
mm, mm,
because it is, in fact, purified by heating it up at a high temperature and then have the froth come to
yeah,
the top, and
yeah,
then they scoop it off.
mm,
That's moment by moment anapanasati.
yeah,
But
okay,
they go through that process more than one time,
yeah, yeah,
depending upon many, many factors. And so
mm,
they
mm,
keep doing that. And as
mm,
they do it more and more, it becomes more and more purified.
mm, 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 mm,
Okay.
mm,
And we can also see that the impurities is part of what makes things brittle.
right, yeah,
And subject then, because they're not malleable, because they are brittle, then the anicca tends to break it up.
mm,
It destroys it.
mm,
To where if you have pure metal,
mm,
that metal is strong and is malleable
mm, mm, mm,
because it's been purified. Okay, so the same thing is true then with noble mind,
mm,
would be like the golden mind or the mind that's been purified
mm,
from negative thoughts,
mm,
hindrances,
mm,
unwholesome thoughts,
mm,
thoughts of criticism,
mm.
thoughts of me and you against the world,
Yeah,
rather than you and me boogieing down the great pride way of the world.
yeah,
And so actually you can begin to understand it as boxed or narrow thinking.
mm, mm, mm,
Just like they put blinders or blinkers on a horse or a mule to keep it focused forward, because if the horse gets interested in something he sees over there, he may stop and go
mm,
over there.
mm, mm,
And so we tend to shut things down like that. That's part of the society, is to
mm,
try to block out the wild nature, but it
mm,
also winds up blocking out all the joy.
mm, mm, mm. But in terms of how like so Shinzen Young, for example, talks a lot about the idea of purification, and that being a kind of unpleasant, a sort of not an unpleasant feeling, but like not a necessarily a joyful one. Is that process going on every time we return to the breath and gladden the mind? Is that happening kind of in the background, as it were, or should we kind of
Let us
encourage?
say it happens more often by the mind moments.
Right.
Okay. First off, let's talk about mind moments in the sense that they are actually a variable length, that they are
Mm,
not a set second,
mm,
but that in some cases they're down at the level of a tenth of a second, and
mm,
sometimes they'll last a minute or two if we get
mm,
really stuck in a thought.
mm, mm,
Okay. So, or we can be really quick.
mm, mm.
Like we can sit here talking to each other, and somebody from the other room throws a big plastic fish at you. Can you catch that thing in that tenth of a second? Okay, so mind moments are like that. And when we talk about being in the background, what we're
Mm,
really talking about is that not as many mind moments are devoted to that as they are devoted to what is in the fore or in the
mm,
foreground.
mm,
But they still take mind moments
mm, mm,
that you go here and then there and then back to here and then
mm.
there and then back to here
Yeah.
like that. Okay, it's not in the background like
Yes.
this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That in fact we have to take our attention away from it, and that creates a new mind moment.
Mm, mm, mm,
Okay, so mind moments happen sometimes depending upon the input
mm,
from the sensory input, and sometimes the mind moments click with the mind.
mm, mm,
And that sati would be a new mind moment, is to wake up
mm,
to look at the thought I just had and to
mm,
recognize how unwholesome it is.
mm,
Uh-huh. Or there's also the wake up to, wow, I really do feel good right now. This is really marvelous. I'm glad I remembered how good I feel.
Mm, mm,
But that takes a bit of practice because normally when we wake up, we have to wake up out of the drudgery
mm,
of the
mm,
ordinary mind and then throw that stuff out and
mm,
bring it into the mind of can do, the mind
mm,
of, yeah, I feel pretty good right now. Yeah,
mm,
things are all right. I can
mm,
handle this.
mm,
And that whole mentality of I can handle this is that first knowledge.
mm,
That's the first knowledge that is noble. It is
mm,
super mundane.
mm,
It is a factor of the path, and it is
mm,
not held by ordinary people. That's what the
mm,
Buddha puts right in that sutra right there to emphasize what we're talking about here.
mm,
That this path, this idea of being able to change our attitude to the
mm,
point that we can say yes, no matter how obstructed the mind is, I can throw that stuff out. I
mm,
can I can bring myself back to a state of happiness.
mm,
Because if I know that I can do that, now I have a purpose in life of being able to actually do that moment by moment
mm,
without letting
mm,
that stuff come up and take over.
mm,
And even if it does take over, as soon as sati comes back, I don't go into the thought that most people have in the beginning of, oh, me, meditation is so hard. Oh,
mm,
this is so difficult.
mm,
Oh, the mind is, oh, it's just, I'm so
mm.
screwed. Maybe I can go find a guru. Someone do Shaktipat and fix me because I'm broken.
Mm,
This is the mentality that we are raised to believe. Because how else will society be able to control us
mm,
if we are not broken beyond repair? This is what
mm,
original sin is all about. And
mm.
most of us don't buy it completely. We just buy it only a little bit.
Mm, mm,
And we tell ourselves inside, I can really make it somehow, but then we do it by being critical. We've learned that critical mind or
mm,
criticism of the world. And what we're doing here is turning that upside down and say, I'm not going to be critical anymore. I'm going to
mm,
accept what there is. Everything is good.
mm, mm,
Wow, this is a nice moment.
mm. So I guess this knowledge is like the noble truth territory. Is that right? Like, because I'm just thinking about how, like psychotherapy is pretty much second noble truth. It's trying to work out how you got to this state, and you can easily wallow in that. But I guess it's trying to look at causal
There,
links for things, right?
you just touched on one of the most profound, important teachings of the Buddha that in Western society we just gloss right over.
Mm.
Okay? So, say it again. What is the second noble truth?
Oh, like looking for the causal links of
Ah,
why things are
what was that word?
causal.
Cause. Cause, right. This is the whole
Yes.
idea, and actually, physics is beginning to get down to this.
Hmm.
This is the most profound teaching of the Buddha, is that everything has a cause.
Hmm.
This is what we mean by causality or cause and effect. Now,
Mm.
the big cause or the random everything is happening kind of cause can either be understood as the Dhamma or the whole body of the Dhammakai, or
Hmm.
idiopapajayata. But in a specific way of the way that the mind works, it is referred to as paticca samuppada or
Mm.
paticca samuppada.
Hmm.
This is what we mean by causality, that everything has a cause.
Mm.
And the Buddha um, uses fire. Okay, so the fire is needed in order to purify the
Mm.
gold.
Mm.
And the purification process means that we're taking all of the stuff that doesn't belong or all of the unwholesome stuff out, one little thimbleful at a
Mm.
time.
Hmm. Hmm.
And this is exactly how we practice anapanasati. Every time that we catch something in the mind that's
Mm.
unwholesome, we throw it out. Pretty
Mm.
soon it gets more and more pure.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Mhm. So it keeps getting more and more pure that way. But also, there's the issue that every fire
Mm,
has a fuel.
mm, mm,
Okay, every fire has a fuel, and that not only that, but fire is known by its fuel.
mm,
So we have log fires, we have twig fires, we have match fires, we have
mm,
butane torch fires, we have gas fires,
mm,
we have diesel fires,
mm,
oil fires, all
mm,
kinds of different fires, right?
mm,
And every fire is known by its fuel.
mm,
In Sutta number 38, the Buddha makes a big point of that by saying to the monks over and over again several times, do you understand that every fire must have a fuel? And if you rob that fire of that fuel, it will more than likely go out
mm,
unless it can find some fuel someplace else.
mm,
But the whole point of that fire is that when the fuel is gone, the fire will go out.
mm, mm. And
And then,
this is nibbana.
pardon?
Is this
Yes,
nibbana?
that's the
Yes.
whole point. When the fire is out, then everything is cool, baby.
Is that nibbana? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, that's what the word originally meant.
Yeah, this extinguishing. So the
Extinguishing of the fire, except
mm,
that the word extinguishing, that's a word that I think the Santikaro picked up, and I'm not against it at all, but
mm,
it does have the connotation that the extinguishment means that you are either robbing of it as heat, like you're pouring water on it,
mm,
or
mm,
you're smothering the fire and keeping oxygen away from it. But that
mm,
it happens quite quickly, or
mm,
CO2 extinguisher. They call them fire extinguishers. Okay. What we're doing here, though, is something different. We're robbing it of its fuel.
mm, mm,
And sometimes robbing of its fuel means that it's going to burn for a while, but
mm,
it's eventually going to go out.
mm, mm, mm,
If we keep robbing it of its fuel over and over and over again, then the fire will go out.
mm, mm,
So this is the way that we're practicing. And so I'm not really against the word extinguishment, except
mm.
that it has that kind of connotation to it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Mm,
we are, in fact, putting the fire out, but
mm,
we're putting it out by going in and stirring it up and moving the twigs apart
mm,
and all of that kind of stuff.
mm,
And so um, this is another way of speaking it
mm,
an
mm,
analogy.
mm,
Uh, but the important point here, first off, is that the Buddha makes the connection
mm,
between fire and consciousness in the sense that consciousness is also known by its fuel.
mm,
So you have eye consciousness, you have
mm,
hearing consciousness, you have touch consciousness,
mm,
etc., like that. So this is the whole point. But then the Buddha makes another statement, and he says, those who do not understand that a fire must have fuel,
mm,
that will be to their detriment for a long time.
mm, mm,
Okay? So he's pointing out something here. He's pointing out that the ordinary mind, the mind that does
mm,
not have this first knowledge,
mm,
is also a magical thinking mind, and magic in the sense that it believes that there are fires that burn without a fuel.
mm, mm, mm,
Where when we understand that everything has a cause and effect, and everything is related to and associated with the interrelationship of energy and mass, just
mm,
like the physics looks like.
mm,
Okay, everything is subject to the laws of physics
mm.
in that way, because physics is darn tootin'. They understand that a fuel
Mm-hmm.
is required in order to have a fire. I mean, look at all the research they're doing with fission and all of the solar panel research and all of that kind of stuff is all about where are we going to get all of this fire. The answer is we've got to be very good with fuel. But magical thinking out of the past is thinking that things kind of exist on their own. Here's an example of that. 14-year-old boy standing beside his dad, and his dad is shot in the back. And the boy sees who did it. 7 years later, 21 years old, the boy buys a gun and kills that man by shooting him in the back. The one who shot his dad. Now, who killed that man? Was it the karma machine?
Yeah.
Was it the revenge that the boy kept going inside? The fire that he kept stoking and fueling? Because if the boy had not been there and had not stoked and fueled that fire, then the karma machine would have not been able to do it. Second example, Hitler dies. He goes to hell and they roast him really good, but now it's time for him to be put back into the animal world, and he comes back as a donkey. He thought he was going to be a pony. In fact, the man bought a pony, but when he gave his daughter the pony, it was a donkey. And the donkey stepped on his daughter's foot, and she cried, and the man got angry, and he pulls out his gun, and he shoots the donkey. Hitler. Okay. Now, who killed that donkey? Did the girls crying kill the donkey? Did the pistol kill the donkey? Let's go after the gun manufacturers. Did the guy who shot the donkey, did he kill the donkey? Or was it something that Hitler had coming to him? The karma machine did it. Okay, so you can see how ferocious all of these stories become when we don't have any fuel for the fire. But when we have fuel for the fire, then we know what causality is. We know that that fuel is what is burning in that fire. This is a reality that is at the heart of the second noble truth. Is that dukkha has a cause. It has a causation, a fire, or it's got a fuel that burns it. And that fuel then is in reference to Mara and his daughters, greed, ill will, and delusion. Okay. And then when we fully unpack this causality, we get right down to paticca samuppada, the dependent origination, one thing after another, that fills out the entire sequence of the teaching of paticca samuppada, of how with the foundation and with our mind, with our sense consciousness, that we manufacture out of our past, like the uniform that we talked about, so that that's what impacts us, rather than what's actually real. That it takes a lot of not processing very much, or not digging stuff up out of the past and just processing with what we have available now. And what we wind up with is, hey, if everything is good, then there's no problem.
So in a way, a lot of dukkha is caused by a kind of attempt to make to fit in, to put it simply, but like that there's a desire to kind of create from to try and kind of learn the codes of behavior, and in order that you see the codes but you don't see the reality. Is that, I'm not expressing it very well.
Yes, I would say this way, that let us talk about the codes, or in fact a set of rules or a set of procedures or ways of doing things, and that this is transmitted from one person to the next, because it's easy enough to give someone a set of rules. almost like if it were programming a robot that's programmable. You get this new
mm,
robot into this factory and you take it by the hand and you
mm,
do the job.
mm,
And now the robot comes back and he can do that same job. He makes a few changes here and there, and now I can do it twice as fast as you can. Okay,
mm,
so this is, unfortunately, we don't do it that way. We're
mm,
not capable of going through the actual procedures very well, or maybe we
mm,
don't have quite enough training to do so.
mm,
In other
mm,
words, what I'm actually voting for, and
mm,
this reminds me of actually being in front of the school board in Charlotte, North Carolina as a monk one time,
mm,
offering that we actually do need to put morality in the schools. We cannot afford to let the religions do it by themselves
mm,
because they'll have individual viewpoints of what needs to be done, and
mm,
that we need a kind of a unified code so
mm,
that we can not cause squabbles, that we need to find a way of teaching our kids to get along with each other.
mm,
But in fact, in the United States, we're absolutely sure you cannot teach morality in school.
mm, mm,
It's not
mm,
allowed
mm,
um, on an individual board basis. I imagine that there may be a few places, but
mm,
generally they want clergy to do the morality teaching
mm,
rather than having, real ethics. Now, when they get into graduate school like law and medicine and whatnot, now then they'll have a class on ethics, and that's way, way too late. We need to have this morality training
mm,
in the first and second and third grade. So the morality training, though, is not the training that is and done in the same way that it's normally done. It's
mm,
normally done in a catch as catch can, haphazard, and it always has the carrot and the stick built
mm,
into it
mm,
without ever having the real wisdom of
mm,
what's going on.
mm, mm,
That some parents do that. I remember my mother telling me one time that my dad, her dad, her grandpa, would not punish her, but he would sit down and have a long talk with her.
right.
And I began to understand that, yeah, she may have not liked that talk very well, but she got something out of it
Mm, mm,
because her moral standing was quite excellent.
mm,
So anyway, um, the the point that I'm making here is that if we could somehow not give kids a set of rules, but
mm,
rather give them the guidelines of the Dhamma about what is appropriate and not appropriate, what's wholesome and not wholesome, what is dukkha and what is dukkha nirodha,
mm,
then the kids can make up their own minds about what is right and wrong, and sometimes
mm,
they crawl into the fire and get burned.
mm,
And that's when they really learn that, oh, wait a minute, I should not have crawled into that fire.
mm,
But oftentimes, in a real sense, when a kid is about to crawl into the fire, the parents will grab him up and try to tell him, no, you shouldn't do that.
mm,
But in, for instance, the American Indian tradition,
mm,
if a child does crawl into the fire, they will allow the child to do it.
mm,
Because how else is a child going to learn what hot is? You can't
mm.
tell a child what is hot.
Yeah.
He has to find that out for himself.
Mm, 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 mm. But yeah, but then I guess to return it to what we were talking about earlier, if let's say that the child goes into the fire and has like a really traumatic experience of fire, and then for the rest of their life is, psychologically terrified of fire and won't go near it, and then sort of ends up like dying in the snow somewhere because he because as an older man he doesn't want to warm himself by the fire, like, so there can be
I understand what you're saying. Yes, okay.
there can
Um,
be overreactions to negative stimulus, and that's, I guess that's kind
You
of
are
what.
actually now talking about phobias,
Yeah. Well,
okay,
I guess.
and being afraid of spiders or being afraid of snakes. You know how, in fact, psychiatrists deal with such things.
Yeah.
Okay, like the spider. First off, he just talks about spiders a little bit.
Mm,
And after she's okay with him talking about spiders, he says, "By the way, I've got one in my pocket."
yeah.
And then she freaks out and he says, "Never mind, don't worry, it's only a plastic spider. You want
Mm,
to see it?"
mm,
Okay. And
mm,
so slowly, we introduce them to it.
mm,
But that's only because they have been really screwed up for a really long time.
mm, mm,
There's a much better way of doing it. And in fact, it just happened several years ago right here in the yard. But
mm,
it comes from if you are, as a kid, are learning to ride a horse and that horse throws you off, if you can, you'd better climb back on that horse right now.
mm, mm,
Okay,
mm,
so here Pablo is out in the yard doing meditation retreats and he wants to go see. And I said, okay, we'll take the motorbike. And he
mm,
immediately, promptly, then crashes it right into the side of the car.
mm.
But I say, never mind, get on that motorbike and go. And he went. And later he thanked me. He said, I'm really glad that you made me get on that bike because I would have never gotten on it again. Okay, so
Mm,
that's exactly what we're talking about.
mm,
Is that we first off, if we can prevent the child from
mm,
having a trauma, in
mhm.
Pablo's case, I had no choice. He actually did run that motorbike right into the car. 10 or 15 feet, and he could apply the brakes, but he just like that, and then he's like this while he
Yeah.
runs it right into the car.
That's what I would have been like.
Okay, so that's like the child running right into the fire. All right, you got
Mm,
to teach the child now that you've fallen into the fire and we've gotten you out and you survived. Guess what? Now it's time to go back to the fire.
mm, mm,
We want you to get over it, and so we do have to pick up those traumas.
mm,
But eventually, through the Dhamma practice, and that Dhamma can be, if the kid's lucky, can be part of his upbringing,
mhm,
is that hey, you made it.
mm,
You're okay. You
mhm,
did fine with that. Yeah, you
mhm,
crawled into the fire and you burned your finger and you got a boo boo. Oh, poor you, but you'll get over
mhm,
that.
mhm, mhm. But
So we
yeah,
have.
I mean, sorry to interrupt, but I mean, is this the first knowledge that you were mentioning earlier? Like this kind of understanding that you will be okay. That's one of the seven knowledges.
Yes,
Yeah.
that no matter how obstructed the mind is with
Hmm.
the hand being on fire,
Hmm.
I can I can cool it off
Hmm.
and be happy in this
Hmm.
moment.
Hmm. Hmm.
That is in fact something that I think that the Dhamma works very well with for people with pain,
Hmm.
chronic pain,
Hmm.
because chronic pain is first off, people go to the doctor and the doctor wants to give them medications that are
Hmm.
probably opiate based,
Hmm.
which means that they're on a sliding skill hill going downhill into
Hmm.
drug use.
Hmm.
And all the while, no matter how much drugs they take, they still have the same quality that they started out with, and that is that that chronic pain, above all else, they don't like it.
Yeah.
And they want to get rid of that chronic pain, and they'll do anything to get rid of it because they don't like it.
Hmm.
Second noble truth, right
Hmm.
here, okay?
Hmm.
I don't like that sensation.
Hmm.
Learning to understand that it's a sensation in the body and that it's not a chronic pain,
Hmm.
that it's only a chronic pain because, number one, we call it chronic and
Hmm.
we call it pain.
Hmm.
And the chronic quality of it is that every time I remember, there it is, and then I hate it, and then there it
Hmm.
is, and I hate it, okay?
Hmm.
But if we start dealing with that wisely, then we can say, there that sensation is, and look, I only noticed it.
Hmm.
Was it there when I wasn't noticing it?
Mm-hmm.
And then we begin to notice it and pay attention to it as if, in fact, if it is a constant companion, wouldn't you rather have the companions with friends or
Mm-hmm.
to be companions with enemies?
So I guess this is again making me think of the uniform and the um, to stretch the metaphor. It's making me think of the pain as like a message, and it's wearing this uniform of um, of pain, as it were. Um,
Hmm. Most pain is, in fact, a message.
mm,
Not all. Sometimes there's really chronic pain that has
mm,
no relief and uh, no
mm,
known cause. It
yeah.
definitely has a cause. But take the example of one of the places where people do feel a whole lot of pain is with, let us say, a broken forearm. This part of the arm is broken.
Mm,
And so they will put maybe even a shoulder cast on it because they
mm,
want you to keep it still so that it will heal.
mm,
But every time that kid gets that hand and starts doing, because
mm,
it's his
mm,
right hand and he does everything with his right hand, it's going to start hurting again. And the arm is telling him, hey, stop doing that. I'm healing
mm,
here.
mm, mm, mm,
And the same thing is with a broken leg. Don't walk, don't go, don't get on those crutches, don't go anywhere. Sit down and let the leg heal,
mm,
is
mm,
what the leg is saying.
mm, mm,
This is true for many kind of curative healings. And in fact, the old joke is the patient goes into the doctor. He says, "Hello, doctor," and the doctor says, "Yes, may I help you?" And he says, "Every time I do this, my elbow hurts." And the doctor says, "Well, maybe you should stop doing this, and the elbow
mm,
won't hurt."
mm,
A lot of times, then, the pain is exaggerated because they don't like it.
mm, mm. Yeah.
And if we begin to make friends with it, companions begin to investigate it. See, if we don't like it, then we're already running away from
Mm,
it. We're trying to
mm,
put distance between us and the pain.
mm,
But if we can approach it as if we were that lion, I can handle this.
mm, mm,
That's where
that's
Yogi
interesting. Yeah.
Buddhadasa comes in and says, hey,
Mm,
now, being sick or being injured or having pain, that is an opportunity to
mm,
practice.
mm, mm,
To really practice the Dhamma. Why? Because someday you really are going to be in pain. You're going to die.
mm,
You're going to get old. You're going to get sick. You're going to die. How are you going to handle all of that if you can't handle this little boo boo you've got?
mm, mm,
And so here's that come roaring into place is this right attitude, this
mm,
idea I can handle this.
mm, mm,
And so you can see why this attitude the Buddha is talking about is, in fact, the first step of the causality of the
mm,
noble mind.
mm,
Is that attitude, I can do this, I can handle it.
mm,
That I am not going to be a victim of my own past.
mm, mm,
I do not have to be on a bunch of medications.
mm, mm,
That in fact, I know about this because of Thai doctors. I've been in Thailand for nearly 40 years, plus I've
mm,
also been, uh, let us say, as a monk, I went to a dentist
mm,
in Texas, and this particular dentist, I wanted to go to this other dentist because he was quite famous, but he was in Laos at the time,
mm,
but his student, and
mm,
part of it we had the conversation was is that, well, why don't we just go ahead and pull all of them out because it may be a long time before I'm in a dentist office again. But the whole idea is that we don't need the Novocaine. The monks in Thailand, you see, they don't take the Novocaine because they
mm,
know that the doctor is doing this work free gratis and that
mm,
the doctor would have to buy the Novocaine, let the doctor just pull the tooth out.
mm,
And then the monks don't even bother to get the prescription. He says,
mm.
well, please take this one because this is for antibiotics, but this one is a pain medicine, and I know you're not going to take it anyway.
Mm,
Okay, this is getting back to the point of what Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was talking about. Is that this is well known within the Sangha, that the
Mm,
Sangha have the idea that they're tough dudes. They can
mhm,
handle it.
mhm,
They can handle having teeth pulled and drilled and no novocaine, and they can handle whatever pain there comes.
yeah.
Achan Po walked around blind for several years because the cataracts had come, and they finally tricked him into getting him into the doctor to have the. And it's an easy surgery now.
Mm, mm. I remember reading a while ago there was some, part of these tests they do on monks now and then, and it was about pain response, and they told a test group and the monks both that they were going to get an electric shock, and they asked them to measure their pain response, and they showed the graphs of it, and the people who weren't trained meditators, there was a long ramp up to the pain. So even in advance of the actual shock, they were suffering, as it were, and then they got shocked. Then there was a very slow decline. But the monks, it was flat. Then they got shocked, and it went right up, and it was actually higher than they reported higher intensities than any of the non-meditators, and then at the end it just went straight back down. So they felt it more strongly, as it were, but it was in the moment, and then it went. There was no suffering before or after.
Something like be here now.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
were really here now,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
rather than the anticipation and the aftermath.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's very interesting. I have not heard that, but it fits exactly in with everything that I know about monks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, it hurt a lot, but that's all right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm.
At least
Okay.
you get to experience the pulling when they actually take the tooth and twist it around so that they can get it out.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Where when the mouth is numb, we don't get any of that. You get
Juicy feeling.
so this is how we begin to understand pain
Mm.
is just like anything else we don't like.
Mm. Mm.
Because now it's the issue of the actual sensation,
Mm.
but that we don't hate it.
Mm. Mm.
That you could say that in fact that bell shaping of the curve is all about the negative response
Mm.
of ill will, not liking, wanting it to go away, and because they wanted it to go away, it didn't go away so quickly.
Mm.
It kind of
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
slowly went away.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
So this is what we're actually. How can you remember that second that you got shocked is over now? And
Yeah,
guess what? You're not getting shocked right now. Isn't that
yeah,
marvelous?
yeah. Definitely, that's the one. That's the trick. Okay,
So
thank you so
that's
much.
what takes sati.
Mm.
That's the whole idea of the sati is keep coming back to this present moment and experience it as it is right now,
Mm-hmm.
rather than shading it with the
Mm-hmm.
past.
Mm-hmm. 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 Okay, I'll think on that this week. Thank you so much, Dhammarato.
I'm really glad you called,
Yeah,
Patrick.
yeah, yeah. Me too. Thanks a lot. See you later. Bye bye. Have a good day. Bye bye.
Okay, bye bye.